Once again, let me welcome you to another edition of Real Talk Family Life. We are now streaming on YouTube. So send your friends and family members and loved ones to YouTube or bring them on Zoom so they can participate in this discussion. We have an esteemed panel with us here this evening, and I can't wait to introduce them to you. I see Ronald is trying to get his audio in, and others are trying to get on board. But I'm going to introduce this esteemed panel to you because you'd be surprised at the heavy hitters that we have in the house for you this evening. And as I introduce each member of the panel, I'm going to ask him, yes, I said him, all gentlemen, to give you a little bit more about themselves, tell you a little bit more about themselves so that they can connect with you in this virtual platform. I want to remind you that you can participate in so many different ways. First of all, we have those reactions, those emojis that you can utilize. I'm just going to put a few up behind me so you can see what I'm talking about. You know, if it's a thumbs up or you clap your hands, if somebody says something that is absolutely hilarious, hey, put that emoji up there. That's fine too. If you're surprised or shocked, put that up there as well. If you love what's being said or you want to celebrate something that's being said, feel free to use those emojis because that is a way of communicating as well. And you know, we have the chat box. Feel free to put your comments or questions in the chat. Even those of you on YouTube, if you have a question, go ahead and put it in the chat. We will get it and we will ask it here on the Zoom platform for our panelists to address. So use your emojis, use your reactions, and of course, you can verbalize your comments or your questions as well. So raise your hand, we will acknowledge you and allow you to unmute and verbalize a question that you may have or something you'd like to share. So it's time to get started. Let's get ready and let's go. First, let me introduce to you by name, and he will do the rest of the introduction himself. Here we go. Reverend Joseph Griffith. He is no stranger to our program. Pastor Griffith?
Thank you very much, sister. You all know me. I've been serving God for 40 years. I think I've been in ministry for almost as long as that. And I'm married for 35 years and still going on. The point I'm making there is I'm one who believes, and I've been in my church, the Caribbean Evangelistic Fellowship, for all those 40 years plus. So I stand to represent the consistency of serving the Lord. That's much I can say about myself, the little more I add.
Thank you, Pastor Griffith. Yes, you are no stranger to this community. Next, I'm going to introduce to you Reverend Ronald Nathan, a new face, but in no regard any less of a heavy hitter than Pastor Griffith is. So Reverend Nathan.
Thank you very much, Dr. Nev, and thank you for the opportunity to be able to share this platform with you and my esteemed panelists. I am pleased to be here. I am the pastor of the Hogard AME Zion Church in Jackson, St. Michael, in the nation of Barbados. I come to this position and to this opportunity with a diverse, unlike my consistent brother, I come with a diverse background of being to several Caribbean territories as pastor and as presiding elder. I've also been pastor in the UK, missionary in East Africa, and a consultant to a number of different Christian bodies.
Thank you. Didn't I tell you heavy hitter, right? Thank you, Reverend Nathan. But you know, in everything that you shared, there's something that I'm picking up that is a little different than what that could add some value, I would say, to what you shared. I am hearing a difference in your accent. Where are you from?
I'm British born of Trinidadian parents working at present in Barbados.
Okay. I know I heard that, Trini. Seeping
Okay.
through. All right. Next, we have Reverend Emerson Boyce, another heavy hitter. Go ahead, sir. Oh, please unmute.
That's always my problem. Sorry. Good evening, Dr. Nett.
Good
And
evening.
good evening to my esteemed panelists and those who are viewing and listening from all parts of the globe. I'm a Barbadian by birth and a Bartrin by marriage and association. I'm not so sure that I am not known because I've been around lots many years. I grew up in church. I served with the Pentecostal Assemblies of the West Indies as a missionary to St. Lucia. Then I became the district superintendent in Barbados until I was seconded to our Bible school and head office back to Trinidad. And I am now currently serving as Secretary General with the Evangelical Association of the Caribbean. I need to confess, I have two ladies in my life. I'm not a bigamist. I refer to my wife and daughter. The pleasure is mine to be here with you this evening.
Wonderful. Welcome, welcome, Reverend Boyce. We are so delighted that you all three gentlemen have agreed to become part of this panel. It's so important that we have people on our panel who can speak to the topic that we are presenting, not only from a biblical perspective, but also from having dealt with real life situations, either personally or as part of being in the clergy and working with your members, with your congregants. So we are so excited that you are here. Now, you've heard who they are. Let's talk about our topic. So our topic today is managing family discord, managing family discord. And just to give you a very brief definition of family discord is defined as any real or perceived problems within family members. Any real or perceived problems with family members. And perceived is important because oftentimes our perceptions become a reality. And it's also important because people are not mind readers. So while you may be thinking that everything is great and hunky-dory and wonderful, the other person may be seeing it differently. So your perception is that things are great, we are a happy family. But the reality might be that your spouse or your child or your parent or whomever is thinking, no, it's not. So your perception, while it may be your imagined or perceived reality, it's not. So we have some questions for our panelists to address this evening, and hopefully they will be addressing questions that you may have in your mind. And if you think of others, again, put it in the chat, raise your hands, find a way to ask your question. And again, use the emojis as a way of signaling that you are here with us, that you understand what's going on, that you are agreeing with something, you have a question, and so forth. So I'm going to go to my panelists. And the first person that I'm going to go to is Reverend Nathan. And let me set the stage for the first question. So James 4:1 states that what causes fights and quarrels among you? Well, there's a question posed there. What causes fights and questions among you? Don't they come from your desires that battle within you? Are there other reasons? Are there other reasons besides what's questioned and stated in James 4:1? Are there other reasons for family discords?
Thank you very much for the question. I think I'd like to set that question within a particular context, and the context being that conflict and discord became characteristic of the human family from the very first act of disobedience, what we call the fall, at the beginning of time in the Garden of Eden. And therefore, it comes with the territory. It comes with the territory. We have to understand that families, which are really a system of interconnected and interdependent relationships, will have some measure of discord. And, you know, discord is made of two words. And if you think a chord is really something that is really put together, discord it's unraveling. Okay, so that's the context within which I would set that. And we have what is known as interpersonal conflicts, so discord within ourselves, and that will automatically affect any, intrapersonal discord that would affect any interpersonal discord. Meaning we will have conflicts within ourselves and conflicts within the relationships that we have. I think that's the context I would start off.
Okay. All right. So intra, meaning within oneself, things that we battle with personally, definitely has an impact on the interpersonal relationships, meaning our relationships with family members, that one affects the other. And it's something, it's almost like it's something you have no control over. It has to, you know, if you have battles going on within yourself, how could it not affect the relationships that you have with others in your family? Okay. How about you,
Griffith?
Pastor Griffith?
Yeah, my brother just actually planted the seed where he insists that conflict was with us from the beginning since man went amiss. I might find myself in a funny position if the Bible seems to suggest that it finds its root internally. And I don't know if I want to venture out worrying about what comes from the outside, because somehow Jesus already stated that all the problems come from, is what come out of a person that defiles, and I suspect is also what defiles the relationship. And so therefore I will want to go back again to the passage that we did use here in St. James, in James 4:1. And the way that I see it, I want to suggest that discord or quarrelings or whatever word we use there, the Bible says starts from our desires. Our concern this evening would be to how do we identify our desires, and whether we would agree that is when we have conflicting desires or when our desires conflict with reality, if that isn't because of the problems that we have. But I take note that the word also suggests that these desires create a kind of waging internal war to get what it wants. So it seems as though if we have that internal thing that goes on, that want things, maybe it explains why sometimes we are so passionate about what we want. All right. And I like the point, or I take note of the point where he actually said, you don't get what you want because you don't ask. One Bible use the word instead of ask, they say prayer. So in other words, we need to sometimes let our partner or people around us to know what we want, what disturbs us, what we were thinking. And clearly we need to have conversation. We need a prayer. So both between God and human beings. So if we have difficulty communicating, then we're going to have trouble. And the last point I made, if I pause, is that it seems as though that motives make the big difference. And I suggest that if we get our motives right, then our problems probably might go away. I pause.
Thank you, Reverend Nathan and Pastor Griffith. You know, oftentimes when we hear the word discord and quarreling and fighting and conflict, especially, we often think of negativism. We often, it's the initial thing we think of. There's conflict, therefore it's negative, there's fighting and so forth. But when you think about conflict, which is a synonym of discord, conflict can also be growth producing. Sometimes change only come about through conflict. And when you think about the context within which Reverend Nathan set this stage for this discussion, and you think about, and it's certainly related to James 4:1, and you think about the desires that's raging and the battles within oneself, because you can have intrapersonal conflict as well. Are you saying, gentlemen, that we should totally avoid discord or avoid conflict, that there is no place within the family for discussions that stem from battles raging within us, or discussions that comes from different perspectives, different point of views? I mean, how do you reconcile that, the fact that there's a place for conflict, yet we have to deal with family discord? How do you reconcile that? Anyone can jump in.
Okay, I certainly would not say that there is not a place for conflict. Conflict will come because we have different emotions, different perspectives. We may have a different set of information. We may have a different experience. And so there will be that differences that seek to manifest itself. The issue comes when, one, you don't want to hear someone else, where you want to place your own particular perspective or view or experience as the only position, the only experience, and as the right, because we add value to it, that it is right. And sometimes that right is based upon what we understand our position to be. I'm older than you, or I'm stronger than you, or I am the male figure, or I am your boss. So conflict is natural to human interactions. It is how we handle the conflict that can be a learning experience, a positive learning, or a negative learning.
You know, while I agree that, and I don't think we can disagree that conflict is a part of life. What I think though might be a managing factor, I use that word, is we must always take in context, or always bear in mind, the value of our family. I don't know. We go to work, we build our homes, we want to come home. When you do not have peace in your family, you lose everything. Nothing has any kind of context anymore. Therefore, I think that once we acknowledge that conflict will always be there, I think what should govern us, the Bible says, as far as possible, be at peace with all men. And I want to say, especially when it comes to your house. I pause.
And I totally agree with that, Pastor Griffith. And especially in areas of chronic conflict, ongoing conflict. But the day-to-day disagreements and so forth are things that will come up. And it's about finding a way to address those and to manage them and to find solutions so that we can get back to that peace and accord within the family. Reverend Nathan, I saw you had your hand up.
No.
Okay.
I was just mindful of the fact that my colleague has not spoken as yet.
Oh, he will speak. No. He will. We will hear him. But if he wants to jump in here for a few
Yeah.
seconds, he can, but his turn is coming.
Yeah. And I hear you, Reverend Griffiths, and I understand the lodging of conflict within that context of the family. I am not saying that the relationship or the value of family life ought not to be a considering factor. I'm saying that conflicts arise within the context of your family, and the family sets the scene for how we address the conflict. Okay? The depth of relationships is critical. The depth of the relationship prior to the conflict is also critical, because if you don't have, let me call it a legacy or a history of loving relationships, willingness to listen to each other, the understanding that communication is important. And so if you don't have that and you get into a situation of constant conflict, then you've undermined the basis for which that kind of reconciliation comes. So I hear you, Reverend. It's just that I've set it into a wider context first. Yeah.
But could it be this is why James in chapter 4 specifically states that the conflict, as you said, Ron, really is intra, where it comes from deep within us. And I think very often that is where the problem originates, where the conflict originates. We begin to blame, let's say, the spouse or others in our home, in our family, when deep within me, there is that conflict.
Yeah.
And it makes me think that they want to do me in, so I begin to do them out, and that creates the conflict. So I love how James put it, that it really originates from within us. It speaks of something that you said, Reverend Nathan, about our selfish motives. No, it was Pastor Griffith, that selfish motive. Yeah.
And that's where the perception, that's why perception is part of it, because it's your perception is within you. All right, this is a great segue to the next section. And we're going to start with Reverend Boyce on this one. So here's a question for you. Which of the following solutions work best in resolving discord? And I'm going to read the options to you. The man, as the head of the home, has the final say. That's number one. Number two, we need to establish win-win family agreements. Number three, establishing roles for each family member within the family should be based on their gifts and their abilities. Reverend Boyce?
Yes, I hear you. You're asking me to prepare a thesis. Those are some heavy. I don't think it should.
Just take one and tell us what you think about it. Let's start with the first one.
I would want to begin with the win-win.
Okay. Well, okay.
Yeah, I don't want to begin with the fact that because I'm the man, I'm the perceived head of the home, that whatever I say goes. I think that creates more conflict at times than we ever imagine. I love the win-win situation where I begin from the platform of my own selfish motive. Why am I behaving the way that I'm behaving? And why don't I make the effort to understand why my spouse behaved the way she does? Very often, she could be responding or reacting to my own behavior. And so if I give her an opportunity to be heard, to say to me, using an I word, my wife, her name is Jennifer, look, Jenny, not that I don't hate you, I love you, but I do not like your behavior. I think that helps. And I think that the win-win situation would rather work here. What was the other one you said? Not the one with the head.
Establishing roles based on giftings and abilities.
Yeah, I could speak to that also and use myself as an example. My wife and I, we've been married now for 45 years, and we didn't reach there overnight. We had some serious, in fact, we never quarreled in our 45 years. But I can tell you, we had intense fellowship. we had intense fellowship. And I believe that when you sit and you work things through, and you understand that your wife is as gifted as you are, she is better gifted in certain situations. I am better gifted in certain situations. There's no need to compete. So we can complement. And when you complement instead of competing, it reduces the conflict. So I deal with my selfish motive. I look at what God's words say, and it helps me then to establish the platform from which both parties, the two spouses, can establish that win-win situation. And we can, by our gifts and our skills, help to manage the conflict. I pause.
All right, Reverend Nathan, you're up.
I find it an interesting subject, this whole issue of the family and the head as having the final say. In a region where over 60% of families are female-headed. Yeah. That's the reality of our region. Okay? So given that that situation exists, and sorry, I like to always take things from just a slightly off-center point of view. I therefore ask, here is mom trying to hold things together in the home. She has some measure of income generating activity. She may have to go out to work. She may be a farmer, or she may be dependent on the finances given to her by one of the children or by a absent father. All right, I'm meaning absent from the home.
Yeah.
Conflicts will arise. You're not giving enough money to support the children. School coming, they need school books, they need clothes, they need shoes. You have conflicts related to one of the children saying, I old enough now, I don't need to go to church with you. All right, you have all of these things taking place. How do we seek to address those issues that would arise? I think an atmosphere of collaboration and consultation is important within the home.
Mm-hmm.
All right. The willingness to say, your sister is speaking, let her finish. Yeah. Then you can speak and put your point over. I think we have to begin to develop those qualities. And, if I use the scriptural reference of God saying, come, let us reason together.
Reason together.
Yeah. That seems to allow for some willingness to collaborate at coming to a solution to the problem that has arisen, the conflict, etc. I pause.
All right, before I check for audience questions, I want to throw something at you gentlemen. I'd like you to put your counseling hat on, right? You're not talking about your family. You're not talking about, you're talking about a family that comes before you for counseling, right? So this couple comes to you, married couple, husband and wife in the home, And the man says, you know, I'm the head of the house. That's biblical. The Bible says, I am the head of the home. Therefore, as the head, I am the one who makes the final decisions, right? Yes, I am aware that we live, I tell my wife, if she wants to end up like those other women in the community who do not have a male in the home, that she will listen to what I say. She will follow my directions. And I'm referring back to the fact that you said that in that community, that the number of single-headed female households is really high, right? So he's saying to his wife, if you want to be like those other women, you need to listen to me as the head of the home, which is supported biblically. Then I have to have the final say. What do you say? How do you counsel a family that comes with this as their discord?
I think that is where the problem lies, when the gentleman emphatically states, I am the head of the home and I have the final say. I love the word final. Final here doesn't mean I have the only say. It seems, as Brother Nathan suggested, that there's collaboration, there's discussion, and it leads to an agreement, again, that the man, being the head, would finally go out and do what has to be done. But if the man emphatically states, I am the head of the home, and whatever I say goes, I will do this, then you're not collaborating. And that, again, adds fuel to the fire, and conflict continues to grow. And I think this is what the scripture is talking about, that we should be concerned one for another. We should, talk nicely to each other. We should allow the partner to be heard. So if you're saying I have the final say, I'm the head of the home, and you're not giving the spouse an opportunity to be heard, conflict will always be there.
I'm aware of the fact that final say cannot be the only opinion. Having shared together, having spoken about the issue, all right? And I like to try to ground these situations in a real, like, we have a disagreement about discipline of one of our children, right? And a decision needs to be made, because we cannot have the children not having an idea of which way to go. A decision has to be made. And we as parents have to come to some agreement. And there's always room for agreement with someone because you respect their particular authority, or they had particular responsibility for this area. And so that has to be understood. If we've said, well, look, you are dealing with these matters, and I'll give my opinion, but what you say goes, based upon the fact that we've had this collaborative, consultative experience. The idea that only one person in a union is allowed to come to a conclusion seems to undermine the very concept of marriage. I wonder if you're with me. The coming together of two individuals, two persons becoming one, and as we have a biblical mandate, you enter into your own home as such, and then you begin to make life there together. The idea that somehow we come to a decision seems to contradict the nature of what marriage is. I rest my case.
I'm going to ask Pastor Griffith to jump in.
If I bore Pastor Nathan, I can't quote the exact word he said, but let me think a little different and approach a little differently.
Yeah.
And this is the angle. Now, there's no doubt that there are rules in a family, whether they're stereotype or whether they're whatever, essentially there are rules. And if in fact, between husband and wife, that context, the word is, and from marriage, we get the idea that it's complementary, right? So there's no debate, I think, whatsoever here that the rules rules means division of labor, and whatever we do complements. But is it not also true that we might be tending to misinterpret the idea about I have the final say? I give you an alternative interpretation for that. I remember when I used to work, you guess I'm retired now. I remember having a discussion with where my boss was speaking, and my boss said, now listen to me very carefully. Whatever happens on this job, I coming back and I ask he. You know why? Because he's ultimately in charge. In reality, there come times in family lives where decisions has got to be made. And ultimately, if the man would have considered all the factors, and then the man would have to say, look, I know we can't agree, but let me tell you what, I think we're going to have to go. Because whatever it done, it cannot say like Adam, a she. And I'm saying in that context, there is room where the man say, but I'm the boss. Not that I won't hear you, but he meant having considered the fact, I think I must do that leadership. And my words here is that, tell me which woman don't expect a man to be a man. I pause.
You know, Pastor Griffith, that's a great question. And I'm willing to say that every woman wants her man to be a man. But it always amazes me when someone has to tell you that they're the boss. It means that you're not sure you're the boss. You know, if you have to state it like that, emphatically.
Ma'am, I want to interrupt you briefly. There's an alternative perspective. You see, sometimes you got to remind the people who is the boss because they got disrespect.
No, we didn't talk about disrespect. Now you put in something else into the mix there. But I rest. Rest the voice. You want to say something?
I'm not walking that road.
Yeah.
No, I'm not walking that road. I like where Mr. Nathan has taken us and the whole consultative approach.
Yes.
And sometimes we may, like Brother Griffith is saying, we may be speaking the truth, and there comes a time when you have to be very definitive in what you're saying. But if you have to keep saying that you're the boss and whatever I say goes, it says something about who you are.
Yeah.
And that too creates conflict because the wife and your children know that you're the daddy, you're the head. So you don't have to keep saying it. They just expect that you live it out, that you practice it.
There you go.
And my take though is I love the win-win situation.
Mm-hmm.
I love the whole idea of roles. And I think that when God created man, generic, and he made them male and female, therein is the division of labor. Therein is the difference of roles. And there's some things that men do better when they allow their women to do it, and vice versa. And I think if we begin to understand that, it would help to reduce family conflicts. And I tell you, early in marriage, I had to come to that place. And I think that has aided and abetted Jenny and I being together for 45 years. Yes, we never quarreled, but we had intense fellowship. And I love that, you know, and it really helped.
All right, I want to check the audience and see if there are any questions. Audience interaction. This is audience interaction time. If you have any questions, please raise your hand or put it in the chat. We would love to hear from you. We want to make sure that you are part of this conversation and that we are addressing any questions or concerns you may have. So I don't see anything in the chat. Pastor Henry, is there anything on YouTube?
Not as yet, Dr. Neff.
Okay. All right. Again, please raise your hand or we'll type it in the chat. So we're going to move on to the next section of this discussion as you continue to formulate your questions. And again, since we're talking about family discord, you may pose your question hypothetically or however you want, but please feel free to participate. All right. How should the family deal with discord that arises out of material worth? This is not new. It existed with Abraham and Lot. It happens regularly in divorce cases where one person wants to make sure that they get their just deserves, according to them, whether it's perceived or real, out of this family discord, out of this relationship that's unraveling or falling apart. So how should the family deal with this? Pastor Griffith, I'm going to send this into your court right now. Please unmute.
How do I start? If we go back to first of all, human nature is such that we always want. We tend to want where we want and where somebody else. And from the time you are a baby, you find they got the tendency of this is mine. Very early, we distinguish that. But what we realize, and if we will go back to the case of Abraham and Lot, what we realize is that normally, I mean, there's some people who are never satisfied, but normally when resources are limited, you get conflict. Let's imagine now that there ain't enough food, or you at the supermarket tomorrow ain't got no food. You know tonight how many people in the supermarket, right? And they can fight getting two, right? But if we realize that if we fight to go into a market, somebody get run over and killed, and maybe we got to do some thinking carefully, then we can save. In other words, I'm saying that where there's limited resources, conflict will invariably come about. And we need to approach this situation with some kind of maturity, and we need to do an early intervention in this case. And sometimes we must also acknowledge that we might even have to make some of our resources available to help the other person to meet their needs. Because when every one of us have needs, and whenever those needs are not met, we get trouble. So sometimes I might need to share some of what I have in order to help. But to what extent are we as individuals willing to share what we have? I also think, like I said earlier, that we still need to keep placing the value on relationship. I go back again to the same guy, Abraham. Abraham said, don't let we fight. You know why? Because his family. So again, the value of the family comes up there. Again, the relationship. And the other point I make here is that sometimes, however, we must agree and recognize that we need space, sometimes need to be created. Sometimes we need to move out. Sometimes we need to give somebody their own space sometimes. So how should we deal with it? I hope I would have identified some initially for discussion. I pause.
For the boys?
I like the example of the Abraham and Lot, that when Lot, using a Bayesian term, became very craviscious.
A good word.
And he wanted to grab and to come into wealth maybe differently. Abraham kept a very clear head, and he showed his relationship with God. And he says, look, there's so much here for me. There's so much here for you. Why should we feud? You go ahead. You take what you want, and using my own term, I will take the remainder. But there is enough for both of us.
Right.
Hearing is a very good example of, solving conflict. And it goes back to what we were saying. Give the other party an opportunity to be heard and let them make well, I don't want to say a fool of themselves, but I just said it. Let them see, well, look, you've listened to me, and now you should listen to me. And while you're doing this, you seek for a solution and how best the matter can be resolved. The example of Abraham and Lot, I think that's a very beautiful one. And it's something that we should take into account when we're dealing with conflict. There's so much here that you have. There's so much here that I have. Why should we be feuding? You take what is there, I take what is here, and we can make it work. But I'm not speaking in the context of divorce or divorce. I'm speaking here of ending a conflict so that we can live happily ever after. Okay?
When it comes
Even
to
though we separate, we can still come back and help one another.
Yeah.
When it comes to conflict, I like what is called the CARE, C-A-R-E, way of resolving conflict, where each is an acronym for number one, to communicate. You have to communicate, and communication is not a one-sided thing. You have a sender, you have a receiver, and vice versa. So each person must have the opportunity to express their viewpoints, their perspective. Whether you agree or believe it or not, that's not the point, but you should allow each person to express their views on the situation, their point of view, their perspective. And in so doing, you may discover that your views may not be that far apart, but there may be one little thing, one little tweaking, one little misunderstanding that could be done to solve the conflict. A stands for actively listen. And it's something that we struggle with, especially people who are talkers, who pride themselves on the ability to the gift of gab, let's put it that way. You're so busy wanting to jump in with your perspective that you don't allow yourself to actively listen to what the other person is saying. And you do that without interrupting. And you listen not just with your ears, but you also listen with your heart and your mind, because you have to also listen to the emotion that is coming out of what the person is saying. And if you could connect with that emotion, you may be better able to understand their perspective, their point of view. I'm not saying it's going to change your perspective, but you can understand their position. R stands for review your options. Talk about the options. What are the possibilities? What can we consider? What can we look at in resolving this conflict? Talk them through and come to that. So you can come to the E, which is ending with a win-win solution, which is what you gentlemen have talked about. But to get to win-win, you have to have communication, you have to actively listen, and you have to review all the possible options in dealing with that specific conflict. So then you could end with the win-win solution in mind. Any comments? I am looking in the chat. Here's one for you guys. When dealing with conflict in the home, as it relates to raising children, how do you draw the line between expressing one's feelings, giving a point of view, and disrespect, especially as it relates to teenagers? So I'll not try to interpret. Go ahead. Who wants to address this one?
I want to step in and say that many times within the Caribbean context, we fail to appreciate the changes that has taken place in our children, especially as they're coming to the teenage years.
Yeah.
First of all, there is a questioning, a more mature questioning that comes that many times as parents we interpret as rudeness, questioning our authority, and disrespect. So we fail to understand that we are created to discover things about our environment and to discover things about ourselves and in relationship. And therefore, we've got to question. And many times we don't like the questioning. Okay. Now we can help young people frame their questioning in a way that is not disrespectful, but we must honor their questioning, their need to know. Okay. So I would first of all tackle it from that point of view. We are in a family, and children have their own identity. They have their own need to know, but also need to be reassured. Okay. And within the context of a loving family, there is room for they even expressing themselves.
Yeah.
Okay, but of course, we also have boundaries that we set.
Good point.
Yeah.
I'm glad you said, brother, that there are boundaries, because even if we take it out of the context of child-parent relationship, we can look at relationship between you as an employee and your boss. And there are in fact boundaries, and we must also agree that there can be from the youth sometimes overstepping of boundaries. And I think the sister here is simply admitting that there is that thin line, and how do you deal with it? Because the chances could be that mommy might feel, now, Pastor Nathan, you spoke about helping the child to be able to express himself. And I think you implied in the context of being respectful. And I think that becomes the issue. How do we learn? How do I, as an adult, and these are things that this is part of the training that that has to be given to the child. That is, it is possible that the child can step out of the boundaries. You have a question, but then you got to know when, where, and how, and we got to put that in them. Because even as an adult in the workplace, and whether it's workplace or normal life, that line still has, or that matter still has to be addressed. So again, I pass on to Brother Boyce.
I agree with what both my friends, the panelists, say. I don't think I want to focus so much on the boundaries. I believe that parents should be a little more proactive in their thinking and behavior.
Yeah.
And be ready to give answers to their searching teenagers, rather than beat them into the mud and scar their attempt to learn and to discover. And I would say that if a situation arises, rather than create conflict, it might be better to say to that male or female teenager, Dad, Mom and Dad will get back to you on this matter. Mom and Dad sit, communicate, discuss, agree, and going Brother Griffith's way, I'm the man.
Whoops.
Oh, he's frozen.
Yeah.
All right, until he comes back in, he's going directly down the path I was attempting to jump into.
Mm-hmm.
But what I would say is this: don't wait for your. Are you back?
Yes, he is.
I see something telling me I am unstable.
Yeah. The internet is.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Yeah. What I was saying, I think we have to be a little more proactive as parents, and to guide our teenagers.
Yeah.
And we should ready ourselves even before they get into the teenager stage. because you're seeing the growth and the development. They're searching through inquiries, et cetera, and we should encourage that because it helps to lift their spirits and to help them to be more assertive. So I think that as a parent or as parents, a husband and wife with a teenage child or children, that we should more or less make every effort instead of denying them their queries, but to encourage it. Now, if they're overstepping a certain boundary, you don't wait until that boundary is overstepped to lay down what these boundaries are. So it comes back to say that very early, and this is why when you're having like premarital counseling, you look at a number of areas, love and marriage, you look at money, you look at this, you look at rearing children, etc. So that when the time comes, you would have gone through certain situations that you're prepared then to deal with your teenagers. Mind you, the teenagers today are quite different from the teenagers of my time.
Right.
And it calls for a greater understanding of how to deal with this current new generation.
Thank you, Pastor Boyce. I was just saying when you were frozen, when you were unstable, your internet was unstable, that I totally agree with the direction you're taking this. And I like the proactivity part of that. Don't wait until your teenagers are teenagers to then try to correct the way they ask a question. Children are born curious. From the time they can run and walk and toddle and talk, they question things. But what has happened, and I know this happened in my era, children were hushed. They weren't encouraged to ask questions. Instead of giving them those answers and being ready to tell them about it, we shut them down. We don't give them the answer and we shut them down. So they learn to withdraw, and they learn to hide that natural curiosity they were born with. And then some of them may go out and ask their friends, and you don't want the friends giving them certain pieces of information. For me, it was finding a book. And my mother, in her wisdom, what she used to do is place books somewhere in the vicinity where I could find it and read information. Because I remember when I was becoming of age to learn about female things, back then parents didn't discuss that with you, but I'll find a book and I'll take the book and I'll go read it, right? But you have to respond to those children. So by the time they get to the teenage years, they would know what's the appropriate way to ask a question. And yes, they may overstep their boundaries because as a teenager, you're becoming autonomous and you're challenging authority and so forth. But you teach them how to do it in a respectable manner, but answer their questions. Give them the information that they need, because that's what they need. Bottom line, they need the information. So while you're training them on how to ask the question, give them the information. Getting back to the question at hand, though, where you have
before you let me say something there. I'm just thinking even about boundaries. Not only do our children cross boundaries, but as parents, we cross the boundaries of children.
Yeah.
And we've got to learn to respect them.
Right.
Like when my daughter reached a certain age, I wouldn't walk into her bedroom unannounced.
Absolutely.
I would get her permission. It's her room while it's under my roof. And so that there are boundaries on either side that you should show respect. Absolutely. So I just thought I would say that.
That's a good point, because the best way to teach certain boundaries and teach respect is to yourself be a good role model of respect. But I want to answer the question that was asked by Abigail. When you have one parent who has one point of view and the other has another point of view, and I'll go back to what you said, Pastor Boyce, simply say, okay, you've asked your question. Mommy and I we'll have a discussion about it and we'll come back to you. And it's okay to wait. They don't have to have an answer right away. You get together, you talk about it, come up with that joint response, hash out the differences in your viewpoints, and then come back to the child. And that's one way of addressing that, so that we don't get into the case of of the parents disrespecting each other's point of view in front of the child. Okay. Any other questions, comment? I see a hand raised. Kimberly, would you want to jump in and ask your question?
Hi, yes, I'd like to ask a question. I was getting a little trouble to type.
Okay.
So what if in an instance you don't agree on a disciplinary action or a topic that the child asks for? Let's say they asked for some toy that one parent agrees to and the other parent doesn't agree to. How do you then solve that issue?
Right. I would respond to it this way, and this is not absolute. In my house, we have grown up where if we disagree, my wife and I we discuss it, and then I might say, well, you got to go back. I might change my mind, but you got to go back and in other words, the person will go back and change their mind. Not that I will come. I didn't say good. We discuss the difference, and then the person who was the right person to complete the process will go back and change their mind, and that is it. All right. So I'm agreeing that we shouldn't fight within ourselves between husband and wife in the child issue. But the other truth about it is that we must also ask ourselves, like, there's not a case where I am always right, and there's not always a case where I must push that issue. What I think becomes important, because in other words, that's important, that can pass. It's neither here nor there. What we need to distinguish, however, is where the matter is fundamental. And it may not even be the matter is fundamental about whether the child will go and put itself in danger. It may not be that. It may more be something like a principle that is at stake. So it seems as though that there are some cases where the parent, which one it is, we're going to say it is not anything so significant, let it go. All right? But we still need to weigh the situation in every case. That's my piece here.
Could I just add?
Yes, please.
Having heard the previous two answers, I think it's also important for us to ask if the toy is being given, is it a reward for something? Are we rewarding bad behavior? I think it's important to ask, what does the toy itself actually symbolize?
Right.
Is it you see, because we begin to prepare children to become, let me say, to step outside of the law when they feel that they can get everything that they like or want. And it's also important for children to understand why they cannot get a toy. Mm-hmm. All right. Now, if this is a toddler, that might be more difficult to explain. But if we are talking about one who is able to do some reasoning, it's important that we do that. I think it's also important for children to see parents disagree and be respectful to each other. All right. So there's a learning process in the conflict or disagreement that is positive for the child to be aware of. Mm-hmm. Daddy listened to what mommy said, but mommy said a point, she said, well, I disagree. And I said, okay, well, listen, this was your area of responsibility. We'll go ahead with your decision. Okay, that is also very, very important. And I want to just make one other comment, which is related to the questioning of children. When we put children down, we make them feel that it was wrong to even question.
Yes.
What we are doing is hindering their education. And we find the very same thing also happen in schools.
Yes.
Now, I have lived out of the Caribbean sufficiently enough to be able to come back into the Caribbean and say, what is happening in schools? where I'm meeting young, brilliant teenagers who are not prepared to try something different or to ask a question. They seem to be so submissive and passive. And I'm asking, why is this? And then when they get into university, they're being told to develop critical learning skills, which is contradictory to the growing up process. Sorry, that was my hobby horse.
Listen, I am right there with you. Yes, we are definitely hindering their ability to think critically and to grow and develop and mature and because we're taking away something that's really natural to them. Our job as parents is to guide and shape and mold those behaviors, not stifle them. So I'm right there with you. Getting back to the question that was asked though, yes, if parents disagree, it's okay, like Pastor Griffith said, it's okay to say, well, okay, I don't agree with this for this reason, but it's okay. If you want them to have it, fine. Or if you don't, sometimes you could agree to disagree, and I may not like it, but I'm gonna go with what you say at this point in time. And as parents, that's something that you need to discuss, even before, preferably before. But definitely as you're raising your children, how are we going to handle these kinds of situations? There are times when I may not agree with it, but I'll give in to your will at this point in time. And I like what Reverend Nathan said about understanding the motive behind the need or the desire for the thing, the toy, whatever. If this is to reinforce negative behavior, then it's automatically no. And children also need to learn that there are times when you have to wait. You may ask for something and parents may be willing to give it to you, but not now. Maybe at the end of the month when I could afford it, or maybe at your birthday or Christmas or whatever. You need to teach them how to wait. Everything is not instant. Instant gratification is not something we want to develop in our children. We want to teach them the value of waiting, of understanding the yes, the no, and the maybe, or wait a while. Abigail, you had your hand up.
Hi, good night.
Hi.
Hi, good night to the panel. Good night, everyone. So I posted the question earlier because I'm a mother of a teenager, two beautiful children, I might add. But I have been challenged at times, and that's why I asked the question in terms of, that boundary, that thin line between, being expressive, being allowed, given the opportunity to share your point of view, and yet still that thin line between the method of your delivery while you're expressing. And it has been an issue. And particularly, I call it the Wares Washing Chronicles, because it occurs around that time, Yeah. And I struggle in having to, for want of a better word, deal with that. Because, I grew up, how we grew up back then, and now it's a different era. We deal with different teenagers. They are more empowered. They are more, educated. They are more aware, and they have a lot. They're expressive, right? And I understand that boundaries goes both ways. The parent has to respect boundaries of the children, likewise the children, the parent. But when I am seeing the delivery being made in a disrespect, what I would call a disrespectful tone, manner, volume, I climb up and I struggle in that area. I'll be honest. So that's why I asked, how do you draw the line? Especially when dealing with teens. We know we're dealing with the hormones, we're dealing with a lot of things, peer pressure, a lot of things, right? How do you draw that line and not, climb up or go over the edge or, react in a way that might tarnish or, harm?
So before the gentleman jump in, let me just share an experience with you. And let me just say this. First of all, let me say this. Find a time to have the discussion that is not when the actual situation is happening.
It's happening.
Yeah, have a family meeting. Let's talk about, you guys are so amazing. You're great. You're so intelligent. I really value who you are as God gave you to me. Let's talk about how we do these things. And you teach them the way and talk about boundaries and talk about respect and talk about all that. But let me share my experience with you. And I'm the mother of 3 daughters. And when they were little, I just have an adverse reaction to begging, and when my kids were little and they was coming, Mom, we have this? Can we do this? I said to them, I said, you know what? You can ask me for something once. You can ask me a second time to give me the opportunity to think about it. But the minute you ask a third time, the answer is automatically no. Taught that to my girls. They got it. We're good. They come and ask me something and they will ask that one time, wait, and they come back and ask a second time if I haven't responded in their timely manner. And then that's it. They'll wait for me to think about whatever it is and come back with a response. And I will give them a response. I don't leave them hanging. So now comes my grandson. And my grandson was 4 and he was visiting with us. And when he asked me for something, I don't even recall what it is. Grandma, can I have whatever it is? I didn't respond. I'm thinking about it. He said, Grandma, can I have? And then he hit number 3, right? Then he hit number 4. And I said, okay, time to teach the lesson. So I said, Willem, let me teach you something that I taught your mom when she was your age. I said, you can ask Grandma for something once. You can ask me a second time. But the minute you ask the third time, the answer is automatically no. You have to give Grandma time to think about what you asked so she could respond to you. So his mom comes to pick him up, right? And he says to his mom, kids are amazing. He says to his mom, Mom, guess what I learned today? I learned if I ask Grandma for something once and I ask her for something twice, as long as I don't ask for a third time, she's going to give it to me. I said, no, that's not the lesson. That is not the lesson. Let's go over this again. But he put his own spin on it, right? He interpreted the way he interpreted it. And it was hilarious. But I think it's important for us to have those conversations with our children, not during the conflict time. And climbing up, because we want to get you out of because climbing up is almost giving in, is letting them take over. So you want to have that conversation before, so when it happens, you already know how you're gonna, they already know how you're going to address it and how you're going to handle it, whether there's a consequence or not. Okay, over to you, gentlemen.
Well, so much has been said already. I'll have to dig another place to see if I find something else. But I think we've covered that,
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to move on to the next segment. I don't see any other hands. So let's check here. Okay. All right. So how should the family deal with discord that arise when a child is delinquent? Delinquent children, whether it's in the area of drug, teenage sexuality, and so forth, will create discord because one parent is empathetic, like Barnabas, and the other is as rigid as Paul. How should parents deal with such discord within the family? Brother Nathan, you're up.
I'm looking at this stereotype that we've created for Barnabas and Paul. Okay. All right. Delinquent children. I think when we are looking at issues related to drugs, you see parents out of wedlock, etc. let me deal with the drugs situation. My son, we returned from Kenya to the United Kingdom. My son was about 6 or 7, and we got him into a local school. And I said to him and to his older sister that, one, they ought not to take any food or gifts of sweets or so from strangers. Said, we will give you a lunch pack and we'll give you a certain amount of money to buy from the cafe. You don't take anything from anyone else. About a year and a half later, he said there's a guy standing by the fence wanting to offer him sweets. And I said, and what did you do? He said, I told him I didn't want any. But he came back the next time and he offered him something else. At that point, I knew what was going on and contacted the school and so forth. I think that we have to inculcate in our children the understanding about themselves, and the issue of drugs is to either numb or to give an artificial high and so forth. And I talk about responsibility and being responsible in your decision making. And that was the beginning of assisting him to understand that drugs is not an option, and that it has to, if it is an option, it has to be prescribed by someone from the medical field. So I think we begin to start the process of helping our children to deal with the issues of drugs. Now, it can backfire though, because you may be talking about marijuana, but they're watching you with your cigarette.
Right.
Okay? And wondering, hey, this is double standards here. Okay. So you've got to be aware of the fact that children will test. They will try to push the boundaries a little. But if you've established and reinforced certain ideas, certain principles, certain agreements, they tend to also stay within the safety of that safety net. One other thing I would want to add is I'm not quite sure what the issue about parents out of wedlock is. All right, I guess I'll get some explanation for that. But the basis of all adult learning actually takes place during childhood. Adult behaviors, adult attitudes, all of those are shaped within the first 10 years of a child. And so we have to really be careful about those 10 years. I'll pause there.
Mr. Griffith?
The question actually suggests, although it's more than suggests, that the discord it already exists. So two things that exist. The child is delinquent, but they discord and I assume this is at the parent level. I'm assuming that. But I think we gotta first acknowledge that we got a problem that needs to be dealt with. And because again, our work is complementary, I need you and you need me. I think we need to understand how it's important for us, first of all, to come to some common base, because we got a common problem. And the problem should not be the other partner. All right. I mean, we may have contributed, but ultimately we got to help find the solution. So we got to accept our responsibility for the total development of that child. All right. And so we must also agree that inappropriate behavior, if it is not dealt with, will ultimately come to the destruction of the child. So that is another basis why we cannot allow discord to continue or to exist between the spouses or the parents when the child life is right now at stake, right? And when we come to that first position, we will find that we will start taking off the stress, some of the stress of the marriage, because the stress, the child behavior is sufficient, but then we know the partners or husband, the parents gotta get their own thing between them. It puts the family in a serious state. At the same time, the couple or the parents need to, that's why the conversation is important, need to ask themselves, how have we contributed towards it? And not in a accusing way, but rather a way in which we are sincerely trying to find the best way in which we can help. All right. And finally, I think that we must acknowledge that sometimes that some situations require some tough decisions, and we must be able to make the decision in love. I think that becomes important. So because daddy or mommy has to make a strong decision, we must not think that they're necessarily bad, because tough decisions sometimes need to be made. I pass on.
I take the position that children become delinquent not always because they're led away by their peers.
Agree.
But very often parents can drive them to delinquency.
Contribute sometimes.
I'm guilty. Ron says, what the stereotype for Barnabas and Paul, I'm going to take the side of Paul being rigid. Two situations helped me to be very rigid then, and I had to learn how to get rid of it and allow it to help me to develop. My own father, and then I used to be a policeman. So when my wife gave birth to our daughter, I found myself being very rigid in how I treated with her. Because I told my story to Jen repeatedly about life growing up, how tough, how my father treated me, etc., etc. We began to talk. So each time she saw that trait of rigidity being expressed to our daughter, in the secrecy of our room, or we'll go for a walk and we will talk about it and how we can treat with her. And gradually I began to see the love of my daughter for me waning. And I saw that as also being delinquent of sorts. The tone of voice, the look. And so I had to catch myself. I had to make a 360 degrees. I remember something happened once and she answered me back and I felt I could send her back where she came from. That's the whole rigidity of it. And I left that evening and went and preached, quite in point. And on my way back, the Holy Spirit dealt with me. And when I got home, I knocked on her room, went in and told her I was sorry. And by doing that, I think it brought healing, not only for her, but between my wife and I, and then the three of us. So it is not always peers can lead your children or child into a realm of delinquency, but sometimes the behavior of the parents in the home could drive them there. And I think that's an area that when we're looking at family conflict, it is not only the child or the children, but it might very well the behavior of the parents that drive them there to even the drugs and to doing other things. Now that's me. And I accepted responsibility for my actions and it helped to solve that conflict. There was silence in heaven. You're not there yet.
Thank you for sharing that that
Mm.
experience. I think that was very helpful to be so transparent to share that experience. But you're so right. And our upbringing plays such a tremendous role in how we raise our children. I've seen cases where the children mirror the behaviors of the parent, but I've also seen those who have gone to the total opposite. My dad did it this way. I am not going to do that. And they went to the other extreme, which is also not good. So you have to find that balance so that you can be help your children grow and develop and mature in the way they should. But for sure, our upbringing has a tremendous impact on how we raise our children.
Dr. Neff, may I also comment in respect, I'm going outside of the question slightly, in terms of the score that comes with the handling of money.
Yeah.
I grew up in Laventille. I grew up in a home that had seen a certain level of poverty, although people outside of the home may not necessarily have known that. Let me just say that there were times when our meal came from the beat-up. All right. And I developed a particular attitude to empty cupboards, because I remembered what it was when my grandmother would open the cupboard and there would be no food inside, no tins of anything. So I grew up with an attitude that I will never be in that situation. But the way it worked out with me was I will buy irrelevant things just to fill the cupboard. All right. So my wife learned, do not send me to shop without a list. Right. And I'm saying that to say, and also, I guess, implicating Emerson in saying that there are things that come with us from our home setting that we bring into the new home that we are setting up. Okay. And we need to talk about these things. Okay. We need to be able to ask why. And we need to be open to share our vulnerabilities. Okay. And this is where I challenge this thing about being a man, because there are times when it is a facade to hide things that have actually happened in us that we need to be more transparent about with our spouse. Okay, so I think it's the macho type image issue that I'm challenging there, not the head of the home, but we just need to be more open and transparent with our life partners. And that is helpful in being able to then deal with some of the other problems that will manifest themselves as we are raising children. I pause there. Sorry.
Thank you. Very good. All right. Well, our time our time is expired, but I want to check and see if we have anybody in the chat, because I don't want to miss any questions or comments. I don't see any. Pastor Henry, anything on YouTube? Uh-oh. I'm not hearing from Pastor Henry. All right, maybe his internet is unstable.
No, I'm here, Dr. Neff. I'm here. Just was trying to fix Reverend voice.
He has relegated me. I've been demoted.
Okay, I'll fix him. I'll fix him.
Anything on YouTube?
I get him back.
Oh, there you go.
All right. All right. So I don't see anything else in the chat. I don't see any raised hands. So, you know, it's our time. Time is up already. Went fast.
Wow.
I want to first of all thank the panelists for their contribution this evening. What a heavy topic to deal with, and I hope that the audience have gleaned some nuggets. I know I have, and I'm finished raising kids, but I am raising the children in our ministry. So I'm always learning. I'm a lifelong learner, so I'm always learning. I am going to ask the panelists each to give a 30-second closing remarks, some final words that you like, some final takeaways that you'd like the audience to take with them. And I'm going to start with you, Reverend Nathan.
Okay, I think I would like to say that no family is the same as another family.
Sure.
Okay. So don't be looking over the fence at what the Joneses are doing and try to do it with your kids or in your relationship. I think you need to, before God, develop that unique relationship that comes with the two of your personalities and characters and the DNA stuff that you brought and the emotional thing. Bring it all together and allow God to shape and blend you and mold you into that unique family unit that He's called you to be. Thank you.
Thank you, Pastor Reverend Nathan. Pastor Griffith?
Yeah, it's very interesting that the topic this evening included the word discord. I could appreciate discord because I really can't sing. And if music has to do with the arrangement of notes, and they seem to have certain rules, how you lay them out, basically. And since music is a universal language, even without words, all right, I think that we can find answer, and we can find answer to the question posed tonight by studying music, the forward movements, the effects that is developed by the notes, the emotions, the development of action, movement, uniform pattern, you know, the unpleasant sound or combination of notes. So I end by saying that we should leave here this evening and continue to ponder on the subject of discord in the family and dealing with it. But if you understand music, perhaps we can find the harmony that is necessary for good family living. Thank you.
Thank you, Pastor Griffith. Wow, philosophical. Thank you. Love it. Reverend Boyce?
I wrote two things here that I like to read as it relates to the topic we're discussing. One, we must learn to separate the person from the problem. We must try to look at the heart of the matter objectively and discuss it rather than making the thing personal. And the second thing I would like to say is that understand that the goal is to resolve the conflict in a satisfactory way, not to win the fight. To resolve the conflict in a satisfactory way or manner, not to win the fight. I thank you very much for having me.
Thank you, gentlemen, for being on our panel this evening, dealing with family discord. Again, this is Real Talk Family Life, building shatterproof families one brick at a time. And we are so delighted that you've all joined us here this evening. Now I will pass you over to Pastor Anthony Henry, who is the host pastor of this Real Talk station. Go ahead, Pastor Henry.
Thank you.
Dr. Neff, thank you. And panelists, we do thank you very much. I think the note that Pastor Griffith was on, I would need them to come back because I do not understand music, and Pastor Boyce can, I shouldn't say I don't understand music. It's just that I sing in a key that somehow, they told me it's not on the scale. I always sing on the Y key. Because every time I'm finished, somebody asks the question, why do you sing? Thank everyone for joining us this evening. If I can twist the arms of these gentlemen to come back for our next program in 2 weeks, I will push the program on mental health back into December, or probably into January, and we can continue this discourse because I don't think it's finished.
No, it's
I
not.
think there are a lot of questions out there. And Dr. Neff, I saw you were in your elements.
I was?
Yes. So we're really blessed this evening. And thank you everyone for being here. And I know that many of you would still want to participate. So please do me a favor. If you think that we should beg these gentlemen to come back on in 2 weeks' time, just please go to the emojis, put a thumbs up for me, please, all around the place. So they can see that you need them to come back and share their wisdom. I am seeing
my
those thumbs.
goodness.
Oh,
Wow.
Oh,
Look at the thumbs. Look at all the thumbs.
they're all over the place.
Second page. Yep.
Yep.
Absolutely.
So, goodly gentlemen of the clergy, we want to thank you for your contribution very much. Dr. Neff, thank you very much. And we shall see you in 2 weeks' time on this program as we continue to seek to build shatterproof families, one brick at a time. Lord bless you and do have a wonderful, wonderful evening.
Good
God
evening,
bless each and
everyone.
everyone. God bless.
God bless. Good, good.
Good evening.
Thank you, panel.
Over and out.
Yep, thank you.
Blessing. Good night.
thank you very much.
Hold
Woo.
on. Don't run away.